Janelle Brown's about to go on a mission to get herself freed from Kody Brown. Now, the irony of this is that Janelle is going to go to leaders at the Church of the Apostolic United Brethren, while at the same time, the leader who is going to give her a release is currently embroiled in a lawsuit with his ex-spiritual wife, who claims she's been seeking a release from him for decades and is fighting him over property she claims he's stolen from her. So Janelle is going to be released from the preacher who refuses to release his own wife. We'll dig into that. And Janelle prepares for Kody to return into her life, which gets a warning from her daughter Maddie, who tells her that perhaps Kody is only showing up to cause chaos once again in her life. Kody has perfect timing when it comes to Janelle, and he has spent years and years and years finding ways to lure her back in. Now, Kody today says that he has zero interest in being in polygamy. He says that he is totally done and would never consider it again. And in this episode, he decides he's going to apologize to all of the women to set them free, even though they've already been set free. I think Kody's doing this for a plot, for damage, control, and ego, and also to save his marriage with his wife, Robyn. But Janelle and her friends spoke about how she's ready to have and take the next step for the spiritual release. My mom came to save me from the polygamists because no daughter of hers was going to marry into some crazy cult.
And she ended up dating Kody's dad, and they actually got married months before we did. When they chose to get married, I was like, that's going to be a little hard to explain, but all right. It was a little weird at first, but I'm like, okay, it's great. Like, somebody's here with me, I guess. You know, a lot of my family did not understand my decisions.
They were hesitant to still stay in contact with me just because they thought I'd gone off the deep end. I love how Janelle's family, her extended family, is always framed like they're crazy because they cared about their loved one Janelle not getting involved in a dangerous cult, and they were worried about her safety. Well, why would they have been concerned? Because I can tell you. Let's do a history lesson. Janelle and Adam Barber, they got together in 1988. This was a time period of great violence in the polygamous sects in Utah and across the western United States. In 1978, the head of the Apostolic United Brethren was pew-pewed, and his life was ended at the hands of a spiritual wife. Two spiritual wives of a quote-unquote prophet named Irva Lebaron from Mexico, and a church created by his brother. He split off from his brother Joel, and he decided that he was going to get rid of all of the men that were claiming to be the prophets who he believed were not the prophets, and he was going to atone for them with blood. Because in his belief and in the fundamentalism, there are some sins that have not been atoned through the death of Jesus Christ, and in their faith they are given the righteous permission to cause another's life to be lost if they believe they've committed a grievous sin that cannot be atoned by Jesus. So, Mr. Irval decided he was going to go on a warpath and he was going to get rid of all the preachers. And during his career, he took out his brother, Joel.
One of his other brothers mysteriously died in a car crash. He took out Rulon Allred. He was finally convicted when it came to Rulon Allred, and he and his wives that took out Rulon were later cleared. It's a whole crazy story, but he died in jail. Okay, so dies in prison, and then he has this group of followers, by the way, who find his writings and teachings, and then they ascribe to these writings and teachings, and Irv had made like a list of all of these people that he had on his hit list.
And so these followers that were going off of his radical beliefs, and Irv was like this crazy writer, and he would be up all night. I met his daughters, Anna and Celia Lebaron, a couple years ago, and they spoke about, their experiences with their dad, who they didn't really know that well, but they spoke about how much he wrote. And they spoke about these texts that he wrote, and how these younger brothers of theirs and younger people that were followers of his took it upon themselves to commit these acts for him even after Ivel had died. So Janelle was getting involved in a community that was already at the center of serious violence linked to these wars between the factions. Okay. And it was increased and amplified in June of 1988 in Texas. And this is when followers of Irv made a decision to go ahead and finish his list for his hit list and take out the people that Irv thought needed to be taken out. And so they went to different sites, and it was all at Fort Goal in the afternoon, and the victims were former members of his sect who had defected, and they were targeted under the doctrine of blood atonement. Okay. And so Marth Chenoweth was shot 3 times in Houston. Dwayne Chenoweth and his daughter Jenny were killed at another site in Houston. And the daughter was hurt because she was there when her father was taken out. And then Ed Marin, who was out of business in the neighborhood of Dallas, and he was also died hours later. So this is the height of sect on sect and sect on inner fighting within sex violence, and at the same time of this is happening within the all-red group. Rulon Allred had been killed in 1978. Owen Allred had taken over, and at the period of time that Janelle chose to join. It was exposed in the church that there were leaders in the church that were using a doctrine where they believed they were descendants of Jesus and they thought their bloodline needed to stay pure. And so, in order to stay pure, some of these men were having relations with their daughters, and it's not relations, it's essay. There was also another leader who was found to be using medical practices to essay both men and women through the use of colonics. And multiple men in the Brethren were charged, which was resulted in a mass exodus of people leaving the OB in the late 80s, in the 90s, and into the 2000s. In the late 90s in Utah, a man was at the Bluffdale church when someone walked into the church and slit the guy's throat, and it was another blood atonement. That happened at the church that Miss Janelle went. Not long after Janelle joined the OB, one of the fellows, Gustavo Palacios, was arrested for what? Essaying his stepdaughters because of that weird ideology. And it was widespread and severe. And then his wife, who happens to be Christine Brown's first cousin, was also arrested for helping in it and allowing it to happen. And also in the same time that all of this is happening, a woman named Virginia Hill sues the Apostolic United Brethren for stealing more than $1 million of her and embezzling it and using it to buy property, which is still owned by the cult today. And Owen Allred was involved in all of that, so there was realistic fears for her family. And they likely cut her off for their own fear of their own safety, but also because they thought the church, the LC church, is fully against polygamy. So I just want to make sure that that part is clear so you know that her family isn't bad for cutting her off. These groups are highly dangerous and they're highly manipulative and coercive and in the past have taken people. So they want her out, but she's not going to get out. And she still kind of defends being in there to this day, but at least now she's talking leaving. I think I went in so idealistic thinking, oh, this is going to be awesome, and the conflict started almost immediately. And I thought, okay, this is very different than what I thought it was going to be. There was never an exit plan. I was committed to my faith and I'm like, yep, I'm going to figure this out. I wanted to share that with you just to say that sometimes when people convert to these cults, they become more diehard and resolute in their beliefs because they've chosen these beliefs versus the kids that grow up in it and become polygamous afterwards, or grow up in it and realize it's a lie and then they leave. But if someone's being recruited and changes and then they give up all these things in their life like their family in order to join and they think they're on this righteous path and only they're going to get into heaven, it made her ready to let down her guardrails apparently and ignore the red flags even though there was abuse and conflicts from the beginning. And I would say when she says conflicts, I would liken it to abuse because what was going between her and Mary was abusive. What was going between her and Kody was abusive. So she was a true believer at that point, but she also talks how now she's in a place where she would like to get a release. And she's only considered this after learning about it from Mary.
Would you ever go to therapy with Kody and Robyn to try to fix anything no, I don't like them. Yeah. Oh no. Why? There's no point of that. No. Why would I need to do that? What do I need to do here to finally really put this end this completely? Obviously, there's no legal marriage, and so there's no legal divorce.
You don't have to get a divorce, but a spiritual release is basically being released from the spiritual covenant you made to be married. So, what her friends are basically doing in this conversation that we're not seeing and you're not hearing, but I'll tell you what they're talking to her about is they're trying to get her to move on. And Janelle still is stuck in this idea that she's with Kody because of this spiritual relationship that she has with him. Because when she was married to him in the temple, in the Yub temple, they were given this gift which connected them for time and all eternity. And that means that in the future, she and Kody are still together. And through the teachings, the women, if they are abandoned or separate from their husbands, they are taught that the only way to get to heaven, if they separate, is to stay celibate and to stay faithful even though their husband's gone to their husband so that they go to the. celestial kingdom. And what she's saying here is that she still feels like she's his wife and that she can't be with anyone else until she feels like that relationship has been cut. So her next step is she's going to go get a spiritual release in order to end that. Because she says in another clip that she doesn't if she dies and it turns out that her religion is true, she doesn't want to be stuck in heaven and married to Kody still. She wants to be free from him. I just need to make sure all the little parts are in place. But now I'm like, I think it's time to kind of really cut all those ties with Kody. So it's become more of an A thing in my brain now because I want to cut that final tie. Whether I think that it's there or I feel that it's there, whatever.
I just maybe need to make sure and cut all the ties. Like, so what if my religion is right and I wake up and I'm in heaven and I'm married to him? I'm like, oh, hell, I'm not having that happen. You know what I mean? It's interesting because nobody else on the show, other than maybe Robyn, refers to it as their church anymore.
Kody says he doesn't believe it anymore. Mary in this episode is incredibly clear that she has zero trust in the system. She said she would never do polygamy again. She doesn't believe in the faith. She even said, I don't know if I'll go to heaven. I don't. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I'm not going to live a faith that tells me I have to do this that I don't believe in. So Mary doesn't believe it at all. She doesn't even refer to it as her faith anymore. Christine doesn't refer to it as her faith. Janelle still does. She calls it my religion. So she's still holding on to that component. And it'll take a long time for her to shed that. And if she ever sheds it, I don't know. But she did get the release. And Kody actually exposed this a couple weeks ago or a week or so ago on Nick Vile's podcast. And he said that two of his wives got releases. So Janelle did get this release. Now, in order to get the release, she had to go to the brethren and request a release, and it's the prophet that releases them spiritually. Well, that prophet is Dave Watson. Dave Watson is currently being sued by one of his plural wives who is currently suing him over property that she owns with him that he claims she has no vested interest in. She claims that he abandoned her and he locked her out of her property. He would leave her for weeks at a time, spend all of his time with his favorite wife, not contribute to the family. She claims she opened a natural food store and all of the money went to Dave. She claims she helped him at his other business and all of the money went to Dave. She has said that she, in her lawsuit, has been trying to get a release from him for years and he refuses to grant her a release. And her story, I've spoken about it here. I interviewed one of her daughters, Emily, who spoke about her experience. They've also accused Dave of child abuse and physical abuse of his wives. And so in order for Janelle to get the release, which she's received, she got it from a man that's doing the exact same thing to his wife, Sherilyn, and other wives to this day. Dave claims he has 8 wives, but he doesn't. He does not have 8 wives. 3 of them have left, if not 4. One is there, but she doesn't want to be there. She just wants to be out, and he won't let her go. And so it's just ironic, right? That she's going back to a cult whose own prophet has a wife suing him for basically doing to his wife what Kody had been doing to her for years. I wish that there was an easy way to take the blinders off, right, for these women so they could see the truth. But the indoctrination and the manipulation is so thick and it's so coercive and it's so constant and it taps into their whole faith-based system of what they will get in the afterlife. And it plays into so many of their insecurities and into their salvation. And it also tells them that they will be gods and goddesses. So it creates this level of you're going to be the most righteous in the world. And so that to give that up is a lot. But over and over and over, Janelle has all of these signs saying she's a smart woman and yet continues to not always make the smartest decisions. She's gotten the release now. So let's just hope she stays out of it for good, right? And she just settles in North Carolina and she just moves on with her life and keeps moving forward. Because her family members tried to help her years ago and she's disconnected and now she's released and gets a release from a guy that's worse than Kody. So, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.